the aim for this evening is to try and have everyone walk away with something, a little nugget that they can hold on to and try and at least understand some of the new global law trials that are affecting world rugby this year, not only at the top level but also very much down to the grassroots level as well. So I'll take you through the global law trials as a whole that are affecting 15s rugby, and then we'll spend a little bit more time on probably the biggest change, and that's around the line of touch and sort of what's in and what's out. That's certainly different this year than what it was previously. So I'll give you a little bit of background on why or how we got to where we are today. If you're not aware, every 4 years after a World Cup cycle, World Rugby puts an edict out to all of the countries that are registered with World Rugby and asks for any law ideas, any things that they may want to trial in their own countries. They go away, consider them and let them know what laws are going to be trialled. Last year, for example, you would have seen in the Mighty 10 Cup quite a dramatic or quite a drastic trial that was utilised around the breakdown, the tackle ruck area. That's just an example. That was New Zealand Rugby went to World Rugby, said they wanted to trial this. World Rugby gives them the green light, and then the competitions, whatever competitions the host country wants to trial them, they can do. Sometimes that trial will then go onto a global stage, sometimes it won't. So for example, the trial laws that were utilised in Mighty 10 Cup, specifically around the breakdown and the tackle, that's where they stopped for now. It was decided by World Rugby that it wouldn't become a global trial at this stage. So that's something that will no doubt possibly a conversation be had further down the track. So the laws that are being trialled in World Rugby this year, they came into effect in the Southern Hemisphere on the 1st of January this year, and will take effect in the Northern Hemisphere from the 1st of August. And as a side note, the British and Irish Lions will be played as the same rules that we see in Super Rugby. So the rules that do have changed, or where they're affected most, is around scrum, time, advantage, method of scoring and line of touch. I'll pretty much just flick through the first four, and then we'll try and spend most of our time around the line of touch. Alright? So when it comes to the global law trial around the scrum, funny enough, this has already caused a little bit of confusion amongst some players in Super Rugby, where there's an automatic thought that every scrum that when a player they've been reduced to 7 must go to 8. It's not the case. So as the law reads, and this comes under definitions, uncontested scrums as a result of sending off, temporary suspension or injury must be played with 8 players per side. And the reasoning, as you can see, is to discourage teams from going to uncontested scrums. So it's not a case of if you send a flanker to the bin, then the team that's lost the player has to put it back into the scrum. It's only if they've run out of front rowers and can no longer safely compete as an 8. And so it's just discouraged. There was an example in the Chiefs game against the Hurricanes last year, where there was a bit of conjecture around substitutes and who couldn't go on and who could. And so the idea behind it is to try and, I guess, remove this as an issue. So teams aren't going to feign injuries or be encouraged to go to uncontested scrums in a situation where their scrum might be under pressure. So essentially, if a player, as it says, as a result of sending off, temporary suspension or injury, if that then leads to an uncontested scrum, they have to put a back into the 8 to make 8. So they've essentially got 14 men. The second adjustment is around time, and that has been played in Super Rugby last year, which it was trialled only in Super Rugby, and that's now become a global law trial. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It's to do with the fact that if time is up at half-time or full-time and a penalty is awarded, then the team who have been given the penalty are allowed to play a line out if they opt to kick for touch. So I do have an example here, if anyone is unclear. So as you can see, 80 minutes is lapsed and a penalty's been awarded, so the team in red, Sunwolves I think it is, have the option of playing the line out even though time is up. Reasonably straightforward. And so, I guess from a referee point of view, the only thing to be aware of is that this also applies for the team that's leading. So if they get a penalty and want the game to end, they must tap the ball first before then kicking it out. Otherwise, if they kick it out, you have to play the line out. So that's just something to be aware of, and a lot of the guys and girls that you'll be refereeing perhaps aren't familiar with that. So something that we did certainly in Super Rugby last year, and we haven't needed to so much this year, is just remind the players, if time's up, either at half time or full time, that they must tap the ball first. And that's just something that over time you won't have to worry about as players become more accustomed to it. But it's certainly something that they may need to be highlighted to them before they go and do it, because the last thing you want is a game to end in conjecture when just simply because a player wasn't quite sure of the law, when it's a simple way to manage it.
Angus, if there's a subsequent penalty after that event, so kick it out, play the line out, and then there's another penalty, you can continue going.
Continue going, yeah, absolutely. So you could keep going 90 minutes if it kept happening. Absolutely. Good question.
Angus, what do you believe you're playing an under 18 game and you're only 17 minutes you can play?
Same law applies as far as yes. So that if the game is 70 minutes, so 35-minute halves, then the same applies. So if time's up at half time, so where you look at your watch, you're into the 36th minute, and there's a penalty, then there's still time to play the line out. Or if we're in the 71st minute, and again, there's still time to play the line out. Yeah. Law rate advantage. This is something that appears to be a significant change, but realistically it probably hasn't been as influential as perhaps thought. So that's where there are multiple penalty infringements by the same team. So the referee gives the captain an option. So I'll give you an example. If 8 red is offside, the referee plays advantage, and then 2 passes later there's a high tackle, he plays advantage again, or another penalty, and then blows the penalty. He gives the captain the option of which penalty he wants, essentially. So if there was a penalty 5 metres from the touchline, where the first advantage was, or first infringement was, and if there was a penalty on the 15-metre line, then the captain can choose. We haven't seen a lot of it, to be honest. I think I've only seen a couple of games where the referees have given the option, because 9 times out of 10 you're just going to where the referee thinks is the most advantageous penalty. That might be 10 metres up the field from where the original infringement was. So, and again, the reason, that's to discourage repeat offending when advantage has already been played. Cool. Method of scoring, again, this one's really straightforward. It's around saving time and trying to prevent penalty tries, but no longer is a team required to have a shot at goal. A penalty try is just worth 7 points. I know the most upset people about this were the kickers themselves, because it meant that their tally didn't go up and up and up. So just something to be mindful of that. If you do award a penalty try, don't worry about the kicker having a shot at goal. Just head back to the halfway line for the restart. So that sort of sums up some of the, I guess, minor global law trials that have been in place. The rest of the presentation is going to be focused purely on around that line of touch, and I've got some clips to give examples. Again, there hasn't been that many examples of where it's happened, so some of the clips here tonight are from when the law was opposite to what it is this year. So don't worry too much about what decision that was made, except in the last clip, because I made it, and it was correct. So just be mindful of just be aware of the example, and we'll talk you through it. So a lot of it applies to the definitions. So a player who is attempting to bring the ball under control is deemed to be in possession of the ball. This hasn't really skewed away too much from what we're doing anyway, it's just been written into law. So if a player bobbles the ball, juggles the ball, he's assumed to be in possession of it. And then if the ball carrier reaches the plane of touch but returns the ball to the playing area without first landing in touch, play continues. So he hasn't quite reached the line and just throws it back before falling across the touch line. So those two, no real big difference, just been officially written into law to give clarification and make it simple. So the first massive or big change, some may not have even been aware that the law was opposite to what it is now. So if a player jumps and knocks the ball back into the playing area, or if that player catches the ball and throws it back into the playing area before landing in touch or touching goal, play continues regardless of whether the ball reaches the plane of touch. So I'll play an example, yeah, I'll just play the example. So how many of you last year would have played on from that? Be honest. Yep. You would be correct in playing on from this year. So the change is around, as you can see the example, I'll try and pause it on where it is. So last year, the law was if a player jumps and the ball's already crossed the plane of touch, like you can see. So the player and the ball are beyond the line of touch. Last year, for that to be play on, that player must land back in the field of play. Physically impossible. This year, that's play on.
He jumped from the field of play, is that relevant? Would he jump from the...
We'll get to that. So, in this particular example, the ball's crossed the plane of touch. The player's leapt from the field of play. He's also crossed the plane of touch. But before he's landed, he's thrown the ball back in. Just purely to simplify it, essentially, that's play on now. Providing the ball isn't thrown forward when he does throw it, he throws it back into the field of play.
Does he have to catch it?
No, he doesn't have to catch it. He can whack it back as well. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So it makes it easier from an AR point of view. You're not trying to stand there worrying whether or not he's still got the ball in hand if he's going to land back inside. Quite simple. Where's the ball? Where's the man? And as we can see, the ball still remained in the field of play, so we'll play on.
If he throws it back and forward, is that
It's a knock on. Yeah. Right. I'll try and keep this as simple as possible. So if the ball, these again all fall under definition, so if you check out the World Rugby website, they're all on the definitions page under line of touch, page 170. If the ball is past the plane of touch when it is caught, then the catcher is not deemed to have taken the ball into touch. Alright? So I'll play an example. Actually, I'll read both of these and then we'll go through it. So, and then again, if the ball is not past the plane of touch, when it is caught or picked up, then the catcher is deemed to have taken the ball into touch, regardless of whether or not it was moving or not. So again, big reasoning behind this is just to try and make it simpler for everyone to understand, from match officials, players, to the fans. So does anyone want to have a guess as to whose ball that is? Just yell it out, guys. Receiving catcher onto a cleat. So, and I'll explain why. Last year you would have been correct saying if it was the kickers team, but as you can see in the example, and it's tight, the ball has already crossed the plane of touch. So as you can see there, the ball's already crossed the plane of touch. The guy's already beyond the plane of touch as well. So essentially the ball is already out. So that's been taken out by the kicking team. Right? So, like Glenn said, it's the catcher's team's ball.
It's unnecessary for him to split.
Correct. Yeah, he didn't need to do that, but he did. All right. Same question. Whose ball is it? Kicker's team.
So last year that was Otago's.
Last year that was the Highlanders' ball. Yep, hence why Aaron Smith was darting up the sideline. This year, because the ball... Thanks, Glenn, I know you get it out. The ball hasn't crossed the plane of touch, and so therefore he has taken the ball out. Again, it's around making it as simple as possible for match officials, for players, for spectators. So the biggest challenge when it comes to ruling on these things is making that decision as to whether or not that ball's crossed the plane of touch. Now, the next point was around the law when it comes to whether or not the ball is stationary or in motion. A beauty for the law exams. The examiners used to love putting this one in there, around whether or not the ball was moving, and it was, and who took it out. So, essentially, we don't have to worry about that at all. So this applies, just to clarify, this applies to the line of touch, and I've got an example coming up, the 22, the in goal and the dead ball line. So it doesn't matter if the ball is moving or not, that ball has been taken dead by that player. So it's a 22 metre restart in that particular scenario, simply because he didn't make it, he didn't put it into the in goal. The kicking team put it into the in goal, and he's just made it dead. So automatically it's a 22. There's not an option of a scrum back from where the guy kicked it from.
So he might as well just touch it down in the end.
Yes, exactly.
There's no incentive for
No
him to
incentive to do that, absolutely. And so it doesn't matter if the ball is moving or not. So the example, and I'll play it here. So this was from Friday night's game down in Dunedin. Kind of see that. So his foot's already on the line. I don't think he was quite aware of what was going on, but foot was already on the line. The ball on replay was just moving. So therefore, had that been 12 months ago, that would have been their ball because it was still moving. But this year, and most likely going on, we don't need to worry about whether or not the ball was stationary or not. It's simply a case of looking to see whether or not that ball's across the plane of touch.
And the one before that went across the goal line, so that's the plane of touch. Is that what you're saying?
So the one before was the dead ball one.
Yeah.
So because he didn't put it into the in goal, the kicking team put it into the in goal.
Yeah.
So he's then just made it dead. But because of the law change, we don't need to worry about whether or not the ball is in motion or stationary. So therefore, he's just made it dead. So i.e. he's forced it. Therefore, it's a 22 metre restart, rather than the option of the scrum back. So the incentive for that player last year to do what he's done there is to get the scrum back on his own 20 on the 10 metre line, and that the same applies for the 22. So if the ball stopped in front of the 22 metre line, or still moving slowly, and the player has 1 foot in the 22 and 1 foot out, picks the ball up, steps back and kicks it, he's deemed to have carried that back. Likewise, in the end goal around the try line, if the ball's moving, 1 foot inside the end goal, 1 foot outside, picks it up and darts it down, that's then carried back, regardless of whether or not the ball is moving. So essentially, you don't have to worry about the momentum of the ball. It's again to try and
The key is that plane.
the plunge. Yeah. Where is the ball? Where is the ball? Where is the man? Is what I try and think. Because you can, essentially, if the ball hasn't crossed the plane of touch, then it's fair game.
It's, Angus, it's effectively who makes it cross that plane
Yeah.
of touch. If you think about that, then you can get your decisions right.
So essentially, to summarise that, if the ball is kicked over the plane of touch, it's out by the kicker. If the ball's not kicked over the plane of touch but caught by the catcher with foot out, then and it's out by the catcher. If a player can jump and knock it back in, then it's play on. And I think of all the adjustments, this is probably one that makes it the most easiest for us, because a lot of the time, and I've been in situations where you've seen a player do a great piece of athleticism, jump from the field of play, whack it back in, and he's landed out. And 99% of people think it should be play on, and you're standing there with your flag up, and people giving you raspberries saying it's wrong, and you're the only one that knows you've got it right. That this is just going to make life a lot easier for us as a group of match officials. As I mentioned before, ball moving and player picks up whilst being out, they are taken out, so opposition line out. Ball moving and player picks up whilst the 22 metre is taken back. Likewise, in the dead ball, it's no longer an option of a scrum, it's just simply a 22 metre restart, because the ball's already been kicked into the end goal or taken into the end goal by the kicking team. And again, if the same applies around the end goal and whether or not it's being carried back. So don't even worry about stationary or not. Glenn.
Attacking kick, bounces over, dead ball, attacker throws it back.
Whacks it back. Same applies for line of touch, it's a try. It was a good example, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get it in time, but in the Manawatu Otago, in the Mitre 10 Cup last year, where a ball was kicked into the end goal, and a player who flew his body over the dead ball line, whacked the ball back in, and the player forced it. I think they awarded a try, but it may have been incorrect, because he needed to have landed back in the field of play.
Yeah, it was wrong last year, but it's correct
Yes,
this
it's
year.
correct this year, exactly. Sorry, So it's physically impossible for a player to get himself back into the field of play if he's flown his body mass out the window, essentially.
Can I just go to that last one? I'm just trying to find it in the head. Ball moving and player picks up whilst being in end goal. So
Yeah.
the player normally just picks up the ball in goal, he can run and do whatever he likes with it. So what do they mean by that?
Ball's not in goal.
So the ball's not in goal. The ball's in the field of play, and I'm standing in goal, and I pick it up and force it. So last year, if it was still moving and I did that, then it's either 22 or scrum, whereas now it doesn't matter if the ball's moving or not. It's got to get itself in there, essentially. Just some other things to consider. I've got an example of it. If an attacking player is in touch or in touch and goal, the player can score a try by grounding the ball in the opponent's in goal, provided the player is not carrying the ball. I don't see it very often. I don't think I've ever seen it live, but it does happen from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
So as you can see, the player clearly is out, but because he doesn't have hold of the ball, he's perfectly entitled to plant his hand on it.
That doesn't change that, does it?
No, that doesn't change. Sorry, I should have clarified that, Dave. That's a valid point. That's not a law trial. That's just something to be mindful of around that line of touch.
So Angus, if he's got his foot in touch and he does that, is that a try or not?
If his foot in touch,
Yeah.
no, it's different.
Okay.
This is
So
this is
if his foot is in the air and he does that from outside the touch,
perfectly fine. Yeah, yeah.
No,
Even if his foot's in touch.
you were saying if his foot was touching the ground outside.
yeah, and he's placing the ball down
It's
from
still,
outside.
it's still a try.
Still a try.
Foxy doesn't push
He
it.
wasn't,
He's
he
placing
wasn't
it
carrying it. He wasn't carrying it if he just puts the ball down.
Yeah,
If the ball's already in
He
there.
was talking about the touch line, which,
yeah. I was talking about his foot being out of touch,
as in not in the goal.
not in the
on
goal.
the touch line.
It's just in goal, he's just putting his hand on it.
Placing it.
He's not placing it, the ball stopped, he's just touching it down.
Even if he's not carrying it, it's still a try.
Yes. Sorry, I got confused with what
Yeah.
the scenario
Sorry.
was. Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, this is still a try.
Okay, sweet.
Right. While I was looking around for more and more clips, the Canadian Rugby Union, funnily enough, have some great examples on YouTube. Just Google Canadian Rugby line of touch, and there are a heap of examples that show some of these scenarios. The key is to try and keep it as simple as possible. This is not really probably now the time to get into the specifics around ARing, but if you have doubt around making a decision that's close, just be confident with your call and just stick with it. Because at the end of the day, you're the person in the best position to see it. And so if you just show that you're confident, strong with that decision, then people can't doubt you. Questions?
If somebody is in touch and the ball comes over and they whack it back, again it comes down to where the ball was, where it whacked it. If
Yes.
they whacked it, obviously crossed the line of touch, the ball is out.
Yes.
If it hasn't crossed the line of touch, the ball is still in play, correct?
Yeah.
It's regardless of where they're standing.
Regardless,
Yeah.
yes.
So you haven't clarified whether the jumper has to, whether he can jump from, so example shall he jump from in the field of play?
So
Can
that's
he be
depend-
standing in touch and jump and back the ball?
That's dependent on whether or not the ball's crossed the plane of touch. In that scenario.
So if a player's in touch and leaps up, so he's in the air,
Yeah.
and he knocks the ball back,
Because it's already crossed
it's
the
already
plane of
crossed
touch.
by the kick.
But it's different if he jumps from the field of play and whacks back in.
If he jumps up and lands in the field of play, that's still out then.
Yes, because it's crossed that plane.
So if he is standing right on the touchline, or he's got his feet on the touchline, say he jumps up, ball heading across the plane, goes to reach it out and bats it, that's
Everyone, one speaker, please.
basically, if he's in touch, so he's standing on the touchline, jumps up, bats the ball before it crosses the plane of touch,
Plane.
and he lands out, it's still play on. Cool.
Yeah. So the key, guys, I know it's easy to start creating scenarios that are out there and try and catch people out. The odds of them actually happening are quite remote. And again, if you just make that decision based on what you see and be confident with it, then you can't go wrong. And if you do get it wrong, you had half a second to make your decision. So no one's going to judge you on that. I'll give you an example that happened to me a couple of weeks ago. Crusaders versus Force. And there was a play really close to the touchline. I think it was the Crusaders ball. He flicked it back in. His foot was extremely close to the touchline. I wasn't going to guess, so I made the decision not to put my flag up. And the Crusaders then, several phases later, went on to score. As it turns out, the player had his foot had hit the line. I can't do anything about it. That was the decision I made at the time. I had a split second to make that decision. I'm only going to go with it if I am 100%, 1,000% sure that he is out. Sticking to the clear and obvious. Otherwise, if we're looking for every little detail and trying to be perfectionists, then it's just a recipe for disaster.
You don't have any slow motion replay, do you?
Not when you're watching it live, no.
For the first years, can you just describe what the plane of touch is?
Sure. So the plane of touch, if anyone's not sure, is an imaginary line that runs directly above the white line on the ground. So think of it like a pane of glass. That's your plane of touch. Guys, if you do have any questions afterwards, feel free to come and ask about anything. This will be going up online and all that, but if you do want to check out some more examples, then the Canadian Rugby Union have done a great job. Thank you.
There you go. Ooh.